Net neutrality revived. Why one cheap Android phone is at the center of trade debates this week in fake Facebook announcements and a first look at the OnePlus 6. All that and more coming up on Tech News Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 32, recorded Thursday, May 17th, 2018. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LastPass. Join over 13 million LastPass users and start managing and securing your passwords today. Learn more at lastpass.com/twit.
Welcome to the Tech News Weekly. I added the in front of there just to look more important.
The authority
the
of
only,
Tech News every week.
Yes, the only place where we talk to people making and breaking the tech news. I'm Megan Maroney.
I'm Jason Howell. I can't help but notice that this is nothing like the Shoreline Amphitheater, which I spent. I was at this time last week. It's kind of fun doing this show sitting out in the sun. We should try it sometime.
Yeah, you mean both of us, not just you.
Yeah, we'll take the whole studio outside. Okay. We'll make an outside set. I'm down.
I like that, but you can't go away again because I missed you too much.
I understand. Thank you. I missed being here at the studio and everything, so that's why we're back. We're going to jump right into the top story today. Net neutrality's long walk into non-existence took a bit of a detour yesterday, a glimmer of hope for something that some 86% of Americans hope won't go away. Joining us to talk about the significance of yesterday's net neutrality win in the Senate is Ernesto Falcon from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Welcome back to the show, Ernesto.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to get you back. So first, most people are still kind of recovering from the wounds of the FCC's move to gut net neutrality protections. So set the stage a little bit for how this particular vote came to be in the first place. When did we start hearing that this was going to happen, and kind of what was the expectation that that this would pass or fail?
Sure. So Congress, as kind of the independent body from the executive branch, right? They have a way to put a check on regulators and anything that the executive branch does when it comes to regulation, and they use a process called the Congressional Review Act. So in this instance, all you needed was 30 senators to say we're going to vote to reverse the FCC, and that brought the process to the floor. You couldn't have leadership or anyone else kind of stall it. And when push came to shove at the end of the day, thanks to all the calls and organizing on the ground, 52 senators voted in favor of reversing the FCC, which is huge. I think people expected the Republican Senate to stick with the Republican FCC, but at the end of the day, it's undeniable how many people are on one side of this issue and how unpopular the FCC's decision to repeal net neutrality is.
I mean, the slight majority in the Senate voted to repeal, largely, the Democratic side. And then, like you said, there were a few Republicans that kind of broke away from the kind of the party line, as it were. Who were they? And is it clear that this kind of campaign, this public pressure campaign to kind of put a lot of attention on this and, the public making their voices heard, is it very clear that had an impact in changing their votes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was, we came to this without knowing exactly where anyone's going to vote until we got to it. And the initial momentum came from the fact that almost every single Democrat actually signed on to say, I will vote for this if it comes to the floor. And then Senator Collins from Maine followed on. And the story there is there's just a very big constituency, including the actual local ISPs in Maine, support net neutrality. It's really AT&T, Comcast, Verizon are the drivers of repealing net neutrality. They're the ones that want to get rid of all the protections. But when you go to like your regional and local ISP, the competitors to the big incumbents, they're perfectly fine, not just with net neutrality, they're in favor of privacy as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the next step is to get through the House. If you were a betting man, what would you say the chances of this getting through the House are?
Well, it really comes down, it's correlated to how many people pick up the phone and talk to their member of the House. The way to think about this is how many of their constituents can a member of the House hear from demanding a vote in the House of Representatives before they agree? There is a finite number before any politician decides, you know what, it's too many people back home want me to vote on this. We're going to vote on this. And the procedure to get to the House floor is called a discharge petition. Essentially, 218 members of the House sign a petition to force a vote. That way, Speaker Ryan or any of the Republican leadership probably don't want to vote on this at all. They have no means or mechanism to stop it if a majority of the body disagrees. So, it comes down to how many people come out and go to town halls, pick up the phone, write those letters, go to those district offices and demand, I'm your voter, I'm your constituent, I want you to be voting on this. The more people that do it, the better our odds are.
Kind of sounds to me like you, from your perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, were you a little surprised that yesterday turned out the way that it did? And is that now giving you hope on this kind of larger task of heading, into the House? Because it really does sound like the odds are not in our favor, as our being anyone who supports net neutrality, just based on sheer numbers alone within the House. What would you say?
So it's not going to be easy, right? We're all going to have to work on this pretty hard, as a community. It won't be just like EFF and Fight for the Future and a few other organizations that pull this off. It's going to be us and millions of people across the country demanding Congress act. At the end of the day, they are responsive and responsible to represent the public opinion. And if 86% of the people feel one direction, that's pretty hard to deny. I know people get kind of dismayed with Washington, D.C., but there are times where virtually the entire country is on one side, not just individuals, but small businesses, civil rights groups. I mean, kind of this whole litany of both conservative and liberal constituencies all do not think their cable and telephone company should have this unfettered power to decide who wins and loses on the internet. Mm-hmm. Even Trump's voters, vast majority of Trump voters think the FCC was wrong. And so that gives me a lot of hope. Now it's a question about mobilization. Now it's a question of, are we able to convert that energy into action, and will everyone, take that time to reach their elected official? It clearly worked in the United States Senate. Senator Kennedy from Louisiana and Senator Murkowski from Alaska. I think what happened in those two states was pretty remarkable. There was a lot of just people showing up doing kind of like rallies. You had local businesses write op-eds. There was a pretty heavy effort to convince those senators to side with them, and it worked.
So after the vote, U.S. Telecom, and that's the outfit that represents a lot of the telcos, said, quote, consumers want permanent, comprehensive online protections, not half measures or election year posturing from our representatives in Congress. What online protections are they talking about? Like, what is it exactly that they mean by that, the telcos?
Yeah, U.S. Telecom is essentially AT&T Verizon. And what they want, and what they kind of lost in a fairly significant way in the United States Senate, at the end of the day, they want pay prioritization to be legalized, meaning they want it in law, but they're allowed to kind of say, hey, you website, you want to run faster, you have to pay us an extra fee. They want that perfectly legal and in law at the end of the day. Now 52 senators have said, no, we think blocking, throttling, and pay prioritization should be banned as a matter of business practices. And that's a big setback for them. So in a funny way, they are still going to cry for a law. But as of right now, the majority of the United States Senate is not with them. So at some point, they have to decide, like, when they've lost. And they've lost pretty big on this one.
And then talk a little bit about the midterm elections, because that's literally right around the corner, and I kind of can't believe it. But I mean, a lot of this seems to be kind of more or less wrapped up, for better or for worse, in June, right? We're going to hear kind of the finalization of this, at least for now, in June. So how does this extend into the midterm elections? It really seems like right now, it's top of mind, so it's on people's minds. It's going, if people feel very passionate about this, they're going to vote based around that, at least to some degree. Is there indication of that?
I think so. I think at the end of the day, you can't deny the fact that a majority of people are on one side, and all the cards are now held by the House of Representatives. The United States Senate has done their job to reverse the FCC and restore net neutrality. Now the House needs to do their job, and I think that type of narrative and understanding, particularly if they don't vote on it, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Is it's one thing to have a vote and it loses, right, to more of a majority votes against net neutrality. It's another thing to kind of hide away from voting on it and showing your cards of where you actually stand on net neutrality. And I think that I don't know if members of the House are willing to do that, only because of how important this issue is to so many people across the country. Our campaign really is about forcing a vote and making sure that the public has their opportunity to see their elected representation respond to their demands.
Yeah, and to know who sides where, and forcing that vote allows you to really get some clarity around that. And then I guess the final hurdle, even if this is to pass through the House, yay, part 2 is a victory. But then it goes in front of President Donald Trump, and there would have to be some sort of a signature from him to kind of approve it. How likely would that be?
So I think that's a big unknown. Yeah. I've given up the idea of trying to predict where President Trump will be on virtually anything. Right. I think he is patently unpredictable. And maybe the only thing I have that gives me confidence is, when you look at 86% polling, majority of his own voters agree with our position that net neutrality needs to be the law. That gives me some good hope, because at the end of the day, a former reality TV star kind of knows what's popular, what's not. And if it's popular with his base, that's a good sign.
Sure. That's a really good point. Ernesto Falcon from the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. It's always great getting guys on, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about this. Thank you, Ernesto.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Chinese phone maker ZTE has been getting some free publicity lately, courtesy of Donald Trump, who wants to make China great again. Joining us to discuss why ZTE was punished and why the U.S. may or may not follow through on that punishment is Roger Cheng, executive editor at CNET. Welcome back to the show, Roger.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So first, for those not following along with this story, tell us specifically why ZTE is important in this trade discussion.
Sure. Well, just an explanation for what ZTE is, because not everyone knows what it is. It is a phone manufacturer, also makes telecommunications equipment. It's actually the 4th largest smartphone maker in the U.S., if you count market share, right behind Apple, Samsung, and LG. The reason why most people don't know about it, it's because it generally makes budget phones. The ones sold at Cricket or Boost or Metro PCS. They're not the fancy phones at the top of the shelf, so you don't generally know the name, but they've been building up for years. Now, it's the telecommunications equipment part of the business that got them in trouble. They were caught selling equipment, U.S. origin equipment, to North Korea and Iran. They came to a settlement with the Commerce Department last year, basically agreeing to terminate a number of employees and punishing a number of others. And the reason why they got in hot water recently is because they disclosed that they actually, upon further review, did not properly punish all of their employees. And thus the Commerce Department decided to issue that denial order, which basically prevents U.S. companies from selling any products or services or hardware to ZTE for the next 7 years.
So this is sort of like when I punish my kids by taking away their devices, and then I'm really punishing myself because then I don't get any free time when they're on their devices, right?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, this is a bit more extreme. It's if you punish you grounded your kids for 7 years straight. This is essentially a death sentence for ZTE. The fact that they're not able to use American parts or technology, specifically Google's Android operating system, or at least key parts of the Android operating system, that's basically a deal breaker. That's why ZTE last week basically said they had to shut down all major operations.
Yeah, I mean, that's critical right there, right? Because there are so many components from software to hardware that are being used within ZTE's mobile phones, their smartphone hardware devices. But I mean, there are some companies that could weather this storm. If they were delivered that punch, they've got, companies like Huawei, they're doing their own chips. It's possible that you could, roll with a version of Android that maybe doesn't have Google services, but packs other incentives in there for, maybe that wouldn't work in the U.S. market. It would work elsewhere. Why? I mean, there's no indication that ZTE, though, has that kind of capability, right?
Yeah, and I would argue that even if Huawei were prevented from using certain American technology, especially at Google, that would hurt them overseas. I think in China, where the Google Play Store is not available, it's not a big issue. But if you go over to Europe or South America, the Google Play Store is the de facto app store. Yeah. It's like selling an iPhone without an app store, right? It just you're losing out on a core component of that. And in talking with some folks close to ZTE, I mean, they said that even if they were to replicate a Google Play Store, a lot of the American app makers couldn't put their app on that store. So, you could have Google, you could use ZTE could use Android, an older version of Android, but a lot of the experiences, a lot of the app experiences wouldn't be available on those products.
Right.
So you write that ZTE says this wasn't some grand scheme because they didn't follow the recommendations, that they didn't follow their own punishment. They didn't tell anyone, but they said it wasn't a grand scheme to fool anyone. It was just like a bureaucratic error.
Whoops.
Does anybody believe that, or is that the same following the my kids analogy? Just like I didn't do it, he did it.
Right. Well, I mean, a couple of points. I think the folks I had talked to sort of close to ZT made the point that basically the HR person the head of HR who was responsible for enacting all these measures basically left right after these orders were made. And the fact that the managers, the executives didn't follow up is a huge blunder. I would say there's a fair amount of skepticism about all this. The Commerce Department has noted that ZTE has lied before, obviously had lied initially before they were caught shipping equipment to Iran and North Korea. And so there is a level of skepticism just in general with ZTE in the company. And so it's a tough argument to buy. And I would say prior to Trump tweeting about ZTE, most folks would have considered a long shot that the Commerce Department would have reversed ban, because ZTE had been quietly trying to appeal or get a reconsideration of this denial order. The problem is the appeal goes back to the same agency that first dished out the punishment. So it's like if your kid came back and asked for an appeal after the grounding, you're probably not going to change your mind.
Mm-hmm. By the way, my kids have not. They have not done anything to violate national security, as far as I know.
As you know, exactly.
That's an important part of the discussion. So obviously, what we're hearing about ZTE, this isn't just a now thing. This goes back, last year and even beyond, right? But it is very coincidental timing, very interesting timing. There are greater threats that we've kind of touched on briefly about Chinese tariffs, and this, it's a very big hot button topic right now in the political landscape. Would you say it's kind of coincidental in that way that these two things kind of seem to be happening at the same time, or is one being used to drive the other?
They're definitely connected now. Obviously, I think when Trump tweeted his support for ZTE, he pulled ZTE into the trade discussions, into this sort of broader discussion of this looming trade war between China and the U.S. I will say that ZTE was a high topic in mind for the China side in terms of these ongoing bilateral trade talks. While they're discussing trade, ZTE is also a topic of conversation that China has put forth, and I imagine that's why Trump has tweeted his support for ZTE. But yeah, it's hard for me it's hard to speculate upon just what impact ZTE plays in it, but clearly it is now playing a role in the talks, whether it wanted to or not.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens next? I mean, are we just waiting? I know there are lots of trade talks this week, but what are we waiting to hear from now?
It's really unclear what happens next. I mean, Trump basically has asked the Commerce Department to work something out, which is a fairly ambiguous order. It's just to note that just today the House and the head of the FBI basically reaffirmed that ZTE is still poses a security issue, is a security threat, and basically have sort of upheld those sanctions. So this is an opinion that Trump has expressed that is not popular amongst the rest of the government. So we'll see sort of how that kind of plays out. It's really unclear, though, that there's no real next milestone or big event that we can look to. It's really going to be up to the Commerce Department to figure out, how to balance out what Trump wants with the denial order they had already issued.
And if you're Huawei or if you're Xiaomi or whatever, name your Chinese hardware manufacturer here, if you're one of those companies, what is the takeaway for you? Because I'm sure there is a lot of attention from their perspective watching what's going on here. I mean, obviously, saying you're going to do something and then not doing it, like, that's a bad idea. We can all agree. At least I have kids as well, and I know how that works in my family. But I don't know, what kind of lessons are they learning from this, or is this so tangential and specific that it doesn't apply to them?
I mean, I would say clearly there is a lot of scrutiny with Chinese companies. I would say the other company probably most linked into this, obviously, is Huawei. Right. A lot of headlines about Huawei and sort of the concerns about security that the FBI, the NSA have expressed. The government generally has expressed about it, and the fact that their political pressure has caused Verizon and AT&T to pull back from selling their phones. Best Buy has also pulled out from selling Huawei devices. I think it's already felt kind of the burn in regards to the kind of government pressure on Chinese businesses. I don't hear so much with some of the others. TCL is probably is probably Alcatel is the phone brand that's under their the parent company. But I don't hear as much, criticism or concerns about TCL. It's really Huawei and ZTE have been roped together as these security concerns for years now. They've been dogged with this reputation for a long time. Even though we haven't really ever seen any real evidence, we've just heard a lot of folks express their concerns about these companies.
Mm-hmm.
Well, today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day also, and Roger, you have a great article on CNET about that and some of the announcements that were made around that today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Roger Cheng.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Roger Cheng is an executive editor at CNET and is Roger W. Cheng on Twitter. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Facebook is trimming bad app fat, but first... Sorry, that's a little harsh, but it's true. First, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LastPass. I love LastPass. I use it every day on my phone. I use it on my computer. Super easy to use, and it keeps me safe. LastPass keeps your passwords organized and secure as well if you're using it, and right at your fingertips, which is even better. There are too many passwords to remember. We all know this. We're signed up on a million different sites. It's hard to know and still be secure all of those passwords, whether it's managing your personal accounts or securing your workplace credentials. LastPass makes password security effortless. You just remember your master password, and LastPass remembers the rest, all of your passwords, and inserts them in as you need them. If you're reusing the same old password over and over, LastPass can generate and store strong, unique passwords to keep you safe and secure. It can do that on the fly, so it's suggesting, it says, hey, I noticed you're using this in a few different sites. Why don't you change this one? You can do it right now, and you take care of it instead of putting it off. LastPass automatically remembers and fills your passwords anytime, anywhere, whether you're on your computer or on your mobile device. And you can explore your LastPass vault. That's where all the passwords kind of coexist in one easy-to-use add to place. You can view, manage all the items that you saved within there. LastPass Enterprise simplifies password management for companies of every size with the tools you need to secure your business while centralizing control of employee passwords and apps. And did you know that over 81% of breaches are caused by weak passwords? We've seen the lists of the really bad passwords that people are using. LastPass protects every password in your business without slowing down your employees. LastPass also makes password sharing convenient for employees while keeping access to corporate data secure. Sensitive data is encrypted at the device level with AES 256 to protect from man-in-the-middle attacks, and it's just really great. Once you start using LastPass, it's one of those things where you kind of have to ask yourself why you waited as long as you did, because it just makes this whole password process so much easier. And LastPass has other products besides Enterprise for Business. There's LastPass Premium for personal use, LastPass Families, so your entire family is on board, LastPass Teams for teams of 50 or less. At work and at home, fix your password woes with LastPass, the #1 most preferred password manager. You can learn more at lastpass.com/twit today. That's lastpass.com/twit and see which product is right for you. And we thank LastPass for their support of Tech News Weekly.
And now for This Week in Facebook TWIF. We're joined by Hanna Kozlowska, a reporter at Quartz. Welcome to the show, Hanna.
Hi, how are you?
Is it Hanna or Hanna?
Hannah.
Hanna. Okay. So earlier this week, Facebook published metrics in the form of an 86-page report extolling its greatness at content moderation. What does Facebook say these numbers show us, and what do they really show us?
So what they do show us is the enormity of the scale of Facebook's content moderation operation and just the amount of information that they have to be processing. And this is, more than 800 million pieces of content every quarter. So it's a lot. And we get a lot of these top level numbers of where Facebook is good at catching content before its users flag it. So for instance, they're pretty good, or so they say, at catching terrorist content, nudity, or spam. But they're worse at catching hate speech, for instance, just because their systems can't recognize it very well. So these are the kind of numbers that they give us. They show us the prevalence of certain kinds of content on the platform. But they don't kind of break it down regionally, which was, I think, my biggest concern. And I know a bunch of other reporters who were on a call with them last week. Because when we get these huge global numbers, they don't really tell us all that much, aside from the fact that, Facebook has to deal with a lot of bad information. But we don't know, are they particularly bad in, some of these Asian countries where we've seen Facebook content lead to really deadly consequences? Or are they, bad at detecting misinformation in the US? We just don't know this because we only got these global numbers. And there's a number of other things. They also didn't tell us how quick they are at getting to content. They say they're working on this. They don't see it as a particularly important metric, which I don't really understand why. But so it was, it was a first step. It made them look pretty good if you look at it on a surface level. But then it was very incomplete, I would say.
So they also suspended 200 apps. What do we know about the apps that they suspended and why?
We don't know that much. This is a part of an investigation that they launched after the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And they say that they've investigated thousands of apps. We don't know how many more they have to investigate, but the process now is going to be, they're going to look at them, they're going to see where the concerns are, they're going to start contacting these apps, or they've already started. I believe one of them, I'm not sure if this was part of this suspension, was the my personality quiz that was kind of the basis for Alexander Kogan's app from Cambridge. And it turned out that it was the data that was that they were used was kind of stored in an insecure way. I think this was part of it. I can't say I'm sure, but they're pressing on with these app investigations.
Yeah, and I know that they had, as that all went down with Cambridge Analytica, they have a tool on Facebook that you can log into and you can see if you are part of that. I have to imagine that if they're finding 200, if they're naming anyways, 200 apps now that are possibly following down a similar path, do we know if that tool is going to expand to cover all of these things that they discover? I have a feeling we might be in for a lot of things to have to check on as a user.
I mean, I think they'll have to do that, honestly. I mean, if they're coming out and saying we've suspended all of these apps because they may have misused information, they're going to have to tell users. I mean, by now they're under so much scrutiny that I just don't see that not happening. Yeah. It's going to be a tall order, I think, for them, because this is going to be a lot of work, but they really have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the report also said they deleted 865 million posts, mostly spam. Did the report say anything about what they meant by spam? Is this just like nonsense spam, or is it maybe posts that could have made you think that Hillary Clinton was a child murderer or something like that?
So this was financially motivated spam. So these are anything that makes you click on it and then redirects you to a site where you have to pay some sort of money. It's not fake news. They have specified this, unless there was some financial incentive attached to the fake news content, but they treat fake news in a different way. It's not kind of under their content moderation umbrella. How they treat it is if they find something that's objectionable, they will downrank it in the newsfeed. They won't take it down, versus this report was about content that they take down, or this is how they justify that they didn't include this information. It's also probably hard for them to quantify how much fake news they have on the platform, which is why they wouldn't include it in a very numbers-focused report like this.
Has Facebook been giving as far as like how they're looking at their network exactly, kind of the processes that are happening behind the scenes that didn't exist before but apparently do now and are very successfully finding things? Or is it just the fact that they're actually looking now and they weren't before, which it kind of sounds ridiculous to me, and maybe it's just my own cynicism, but that they would go as long as they did without knowing that this was even possible? Because from the outside looking in, it seems like a pretty obvious thing to me that once you give data to someone, they can really do whatever they want with it. Why did they not? I guess my frustration is, why did they not care about it before and now they suddenly do, other than public pressure? That's probably it right there.
I mean, I think that's everyone's frustration right now. I mean, you see that in questions from lawmakers from all over, right? I mean, Mark Zuckerberg is going to the EU Parliament next week. We'll see we won't see what they will want, but because it will be a private meeting. But I think that's everyone's frustration. I mean, we don't really know. They're trying this transparency thing now, but it's kind of new. They weren't particularly forthcoming about their transgressions in the past. So, we'll see.
I also want to talk about this other piece that you wrote on Quartz about Instagram. Like today, they said, Instagram said they're building tools to help how much time, to know more about the time you spend on Instagram. So not necessarily how much time you waste, but about the time. Like, what were they aiming at here? I mean, I get it. Like, I feel bad sometimes depending on who I'm connecting with on Instagram. I like looking at dog photos, but I get annoyed when I see everyone's wonderful vacations that I'm not on. So how can they figure out how we can spend more meaningful time on Instagram?
So we don't know. We don't know yet what they mean by this usage metric that some developer found in the Instagram API on the Android app. It seems like it's going to be something that measures just how much time you spend on the app, but we don't know if it's going to be broken down, daily or weekly or by yearly, or, the total amount of time that you spend on Instagram, which would be kind of scary for anyone. It could also be by feature. So, how much time you spend flipping through stories or explore. And I guess then, users could see what their patterns are and where they're wasting time, where they're spending it more meaningfully. Although I don't know. I mean, to me, all of that is kind of equivalent. Like, it's fun, but like, which one of those things is less wasting time than others? I mean, to me, it's like, going on Explore and going through your feed is kind of like the same thing. So we'll see. I mean, it was confirmed by Instagram that they're working on this, and this is a part of this push for time well spent on social media platforms. And, Instagram is not alone in this. Mark Zuckerberg has said this before in January, that Facebook is focusing on time well spent and moving away from passive consumption. So just staring at viral videos. And they say that this is in the end going to be beneficial for both the user and the business, although obviously decreasing time on the platform in the short term is going to hurt their business because people will be seeing less ads. And this is both for Facebook and Instagram. Google also announced a similar measure at their conference where the Android operating system is going to have a similar function of looking at how much time you spend on apps. So this is all kind of a push, like a reaction to the accusations that, social media is reprogramming our brains and it's making us addicted. And is, of course, not coming from the companies themselves. Like even the term time well spent was coined by Tristan Harris, who's this activist who used to be a designer at Google. And he's been talking about this for years, how social media platforms should move toward this and not just, this passive consumption and just wasting time.
I buy that more from Google, that they really want that, because Google, they're essentially after our data. Like that's what they don't, the amount of time that we spend. Yes, they show us ads as well, but really they want the most data. Whereas Facebook and Instagram, this is simply their way that they make money. This is their bottom line. This is their business model. And so when they say things like, we want to help you figure out about the time, they just want us for more time. And that's the end. That's their business model, unless they change their business model, which they've been pretty clear that they're not going to. This to me just seems like BS.
Yeah, we can't really trust them on anything they say right now. So we'll see how they actually roll it out. I agree with you. We'll see. I don't see how they could turn it around to make this, try to make this good for their business. But I'm sure they're thinking of ways, because they wouldn't be introducing it if it would just hurt what they're doing, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It kind of depends what this feature is actually going to be. But on the other hand, I don't know. I feel like Google is more similar to Facebook than we say, and ads are a huge part of their business as well. So I don't know. I wouldn't just give them a free card here.
Okay, I won't. So if you, like me, spend half the day criticizing Facebook and then yet still use Facebook, what can I do to sort of opt out of some of these ads?
So there's several things that Facebook has introduced and will be rolling out, like this clear history feature. But the piece that you have right there is actually spurred by an activist campaign, which outlined the instructions of what to do to opt out of targeting. And there's a Chrome extension that you can install, and it will help you uncheck all of your interests. This is a screenshot from mine. You can also do it manually. You don't need to install this extension if you're scared of them. But there's a lot of steps still to opt out of targeting. I believe this particular set of instructions is 12 steps or something like that.
There's a lot of kind of borderline creepy things about Facebook, but I think possibly the creepiest thing is the header image on that article.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that's Quartz's doing.
This is what is it? Reuters.
This is Reuters.
This is a big struggle with finding compelling images for Facebook articles, because it's all just stock Reuters, illustrations or whatever. So this is great.
Oh man, it gives me nightmares.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. You have some great work on Quartz about Facebook and Instagram. Where's the best place for people to follow everything that you're working on online?
QZ.com, and then just my name, Hanna Kozlowska, or you can follow me on Twitter at Hanna Kozlowska. It's a long last name, I know, but I'm Polish. I can't do anything about it.
Nor should you have to.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hanna.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Great talking with you. All right, finally, we thought we'd keep this last segment in-house because yesterday, you may have heard, OnePlus officially took the veil off of its latest flagship device, the OnePlus 6. And there you have it. It's on the screen right now. I happen to have the device in studio right now. I'm going to be using this bad boy. I've been using it for a couple of days, and I'm going to be using it for the next couple of days. Here, I'll kind of hold it down here. So I thought we'd go hands-on with this and kind of show off how
many fingerprints your hands.
Fingerprints my fingers leave all over it. So this is the OnePlus 6. Right off the top, you can tell, actually, if I hold it up against the OnePlus 5, you can tell they've made some pretty big changes compared to how they've been designing phones in the past. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Pretty similar in some ways, size-wise, to the 5 and the the 5T, but there are other ways that this really sets itself apart, right? Like you've got the full glass body. This is the first OnePlus device with a full glass design, as you see here, kind of these gentle contours all around for kind of a comfortable hand feel. Fingerprint sensor used to be on the front down at the bottom. It's now moved to the back, right underneath the vertical array of rear-facing cameras. As you can see with the OnePlus 5, it's a horizontal array, and you didn't have that fingerprint sensor in the back now. So they've kind of moved that back, which is what a lot of phone companies are doing right now. If they're not putting it under the display, who knows? Maybe that's a future OnePlus device. 6.3-inch. Let's see here. Nope, I'll get back to you later. 6.3-inch 19:9 2280 by 1080 OLED display here. You can see up at the very top, there is a little bit of a notch there. A notch is a thing. OnePlus did go one step further to allow in the software to put a black bar across the top.
Oh.
So you can notch out the notch, as it were. Let's see here.
Should we compare it to my notch?
Bring up the brightness a little bit, and then maybe you can see it a little bit better. Here, we'll go ahead and compare it. Well, it's
That's the iPhone 10. You can't really see my notch.
Yeah, because it's a black background, so the notch is lost. There you go. You can kind of see it there.
Yeah.
So it's a smaller notch compared to the iPhone 10. And you can also tell like pretty slim bezels. That's why a lot of phones right now are doing the notch approach, is that it allows them to kind of get rid of a larger bezel up top, which, as you can see here, really kind of fits along to the edge pretty nicely. You have a little bit wider of a bezel down at the bottom, but it's nothing too crazy. I've seen a whole lot wider down there. Let's see here, the notification slider. So on the OnePlus 5 and the 5T, the notification slider was on the left-hand side, and I would say from my own experience that sometimes you go to do a volume switch a lot when you have a device, and there were definitely some times where I got it confused and my finger just sat up there and I was like, oh wait a minute, that's the wrong button.
What's a notification slide?
So this is actually, well, I'll go ahead and show you. Depending on where it's at, it's similar to what you have on the iPhone actually, where isn't there like a mute switch on the iPhone? And so it's similar to that, but
it's not going to show you your notifications. It's just going to turn them off.
Sorry. No, it's more like a silence button, so that you can silence the notifications that come through. So
I thought it would make you like see all your notifications and deal with them.
No, it doesn't do that. I mean, you'll see them whether they come through. You just won't be vibrated when it happens, or a ringer if you have it on silent when a phone call comes through. But that's now on the right-hand side. So you've got the power button down here and that up here. I mean, I'm going to use this over the next couple of days and see how that. Oh, Burke is handing me a cloth, so apparently that's a hint. I'm sorry, I've got fingerprints. What can I say? Snapdragon 845 processor. So that's top of the line processor in Android devices right now. You can get up to 8 gigs of RAM. OnePlus has been really good about allowing or offering versions of their devices with high memory count, and this is no different. You can get up to 8 gigs of RAM on this device. Like I said, dual cameras on the back. They actually have optical image stabilization at this point. 3,300 milliamp hour battery, nice size battery. Bluetooth 5, which is the latest Bluetooth spec. I've had good experience with Bluetooth 5 on my Pixel 2 XL. And this phone in particular, like they're all glass back of the OnePlus 6s, but this one is the mirror black version. There's also kind of a matte black that supposedly kind of matches in color this OnePlus 5, but obviously not the texture because it's still made out of glass, and then a silk white version. And the price is creeping up a little bit. This starts at $529 for the 6 gig version of RAM, with RAM of 6 gigs and 64 gigs of storage, up to $629 for 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. So that's the OnePlus 6. I'm going to play around with this. I think I'm reviewing this phone not this Saturday, but next Saturday on the new screensavers. So I'm going to play around with this for, I've had it for a couple of days. I'm going to play around with it for the next week and own it and use it and then review it. And
Sounds good.
By the way, if you're a big fan of the Avengers, apparently there's a version of this that is actually meant for Avengers fans. Limited edition Infinity War edition with the Avengers logo on the back, a golden notification switch, and Kevlar kind of styled back, and then a case that resembles Iron Man's mask. So, you got to be a really big fan.
Yeah.
Is that
Especially
you?
of those characters in particular. There's so many characters.
I mean,
those
Iron
aren't
Man's
my
a pretty
faves.
popular,
I know.
popular character.
He's not my fave.
Oh, who's your fave?
Oh, Black Widow, probably. I do like the Black Panther. I forgot her name, the scientist. Judy? Her name's not Judy. But she's the Black Panther
I'm
scientist.
sure there's a superhero somewhere named Judy, though. And whoever it is, you should email us, tnw@twit.tv. Send us a picture of Judy, the superhero.
That's my superhero. That's like my alter ego.
Judy, whoever you are, I salute you. And finally, if you like your phones like you like your ride, if your ride is a gold-plated Tesla, then you'll love the iPhone X Tesla. It's a custom iPhone X sold by Russian luxury accessory maker Caviar. The iPhone X Tesla has a solar panel on the back underneath the dual camera array that will charge the phone while you're entertaining international diplomats, probably. The case is filled out with a carbon fiber and accented with gold touches that would make James Bond jealous. It's unclear how much of a relationship there actually is or isn't between Caviar and automaker Tesla. Like, do you think Tesla was like, sure, you can use our name on this really beautiful phone?
Yeah, you think they wouldn't say that?
I don't know. It just seems like a strange relationship, or maybe I don't know.
I don't know. These phones, I've seen so many of these phones.
Luxury.
Yeah. I like the Putin one. It's the Putin, and it features, it's in Constitution red.
I mean, the color scheme, is that real gold, though?
I don't know. I don't, yeah.
If it ain't real gold, I'm not getting it for my iPhone X.
I just like that it's Constitution red.
I don't know how much the Putin phone costs, but the iPhone X Tesla is around $4,500, $4,500, somewhere right around there.
Worth it.
Totally worth it.
I mean, it's good. It's good for the environment.
I guess. Well,
Yeah,
I guess so. Yeah.
Solar panel.
With the solar panel, 999 available units. And I don't think that, at prices like that, it's not going to last long. So get yourself one.
I was talking about Shuri from Black Panther. She's the scientist, not Judy.
Although I really think maybe we should call this Judy the superhero.
Yes. Yeah. She's
Judy's in tech support. Says
She's a
Bert.
superhero.
All right. Hey, actually missing in chat says Marvel on the Marvel Wikia site, Judy Harmon, Earth to 616, whatever that means. So apparently there's a character named Judy.
Yeah.
I doubt that's who you're
Judy
talking about.
Harmon. She's Bobby Drake's teenage girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
Somebody's
Your
girlfriend.
Your favorite, right?
Yeah.
AKA. All right, I think we're done.
Yeah.
Tech News Weekly records live every Thursday at 2:30 p.m. Pacific. You can be part of the show by emailing us at tnw@twit.tv.
Subscribe to the show at twit.tv/TNW. And if you want to tell me all your favorite superheroes named Judy, I met Megan Maroney.
And, is that Judy?
That's Judy Harmon.
Oh, hi, Judy Harmon.
She's
Nice to
Bobby
meet you.
Drake's girlfriend. She's not a superhero. But
Okay.
with those bangs, though, she's something.
She is something. I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. Thanks to everybody here who makes the show possible. Thanks to Josh, Jammer B, Burke. Colleen was in here. You were there, but on the other side of the screen watching us. And for that, we thank you for tuning in for yet another episode of Tech News Weekly. We'll see you all next week. Bye, everybody.